Sex, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the speculative interdimensional vehicle, Sex in Space. Its mission, to explore new points of view, to seek out fresh opinions, to boldly go where so many have gone before, and still somehow manage to totally miss the point. Subscribe to Sex in Space, wherever quality podcasts are found.
On today's episode of the Sex in Space podcast, we were lucky enough to be joined by Annah Pickering, the regional coordinator for the NZPC, which is the Aotearoa New Zealand Sex Workers Collective. The Sex Workers Collective is a national organisation here in New Zealand that empowers and advocates for the rights of sex workers. They also do work internationally around the decriminalisation of sex work. Let's get into it. Today on the Sex in Space podcast, we are thrilled to be joined by Annah, who is the regional coordinator for the Aotearoa New Zealand Sex Workers Collective, the NZPC, and you've been involved in this work for 20 years, which is incredible. So we're very excited to have you today to talk to us a little more about that. And I thought for the benefit of our listeners who maybe, if they're not familiar, could you run us through what the Sex Workers Collective is and does?
So NZPC, we're a rights-based organisation that supports sex workers around their health and wellness, but also around upholding the Prostitution Reform Act. And we are funded by the Ministry of Health, Aotearoa, to provide sexual health and reproductive programs that involve sex workers around talking about safe sex or sold on safe sex. And we run clinics in 3 of our community centres in Aotearoa, and we run drop-in community centres where sex workers can come in and chat, hang out, talk about sex, but also just about sex work. We also do heaps of cool stuff like, do collaboration with institutes around research around sex work and the decrim model. And just, anything involving sex and sex work, we want to be there.
Cool. And so how long has the Sex Workers Collective been around for?
We started in 1987.
Wow.
And from what my Dame Catherine has said to me anyway, we started in 1987, and at that time HIV/AIDS had come into New Zealand, and then the government wanted to approach marginalised communities about how do they get the safe sex message out. And so I guess with peer-based, people with lived experience from sex workers, the Needle Exchange program, people who use drugs, gay men sort of said to the government of that day, if you give us some money to run a public health project, we can take out the health promotion message to our communities.
Awesome.
And I guess from that time, when I look back, the laws around homosexuality was illegal. Even the laws around sex work were criminalised. So I guess with a lot of the grassroots of our organisations it also started that campaign around law reform, around the human rights of homosexual law reform, and I guess for us around the prostitution bill, which was decriminalised in 2003.
Okay. And so how did you come to be involved in this collective yourself?
For me, it's my lived experience. I have worked in the sex industry, and I got involved with the NZPC because I didn't really know about my rights or what does the law mean. So I've worked pre-law reform in New Zealand, and I've worked in Australia where the state, New South Wales, was decriminalised. So I guess I got to see different two frameworks of how the law impacted me and my lived experience. Yeah.
And what do you find most rewarding about the work that you're doing in this space?
The connections with sex workers and about the work that NZPC is involved in. We advise government on many things around from councils, pretty much even on a global level, Amnesty International, UN Family or UNAIDS, UNFPA, particularly around getting the buy-in around decriminalisation, and just the industry's changed a lot, but just to ensure that our service can still be funded to support sex workers that are working in the industry in Aotearoa.
Yeah. I wanted to move to consent a little bit. This was something that was mentioned at the sex panel that we both attended, and also people are talking about it quite a lot in the media now too. And I wondered how the collective approaches consent when it comes to sex work.
We're pretty strong on consent. No means no, and so in relation to the law, a sex worker at any time can, pretty much stop a session if without their consent. So we've just recently had a case last week where a client was criminalised for stealthing. So sex workers in this country have been very world leading around criminalising clients who remove a condom without their consent. So a lot of our kaupapa and our messaging is around consent at any, consenting to have sex, but also at any time in a session that you're having sex that you can stop a session and say, no, I don't consent to this. If a client disrespects you in that way, you can make a complaint to the police, or you can come to us at NZPC and we can support you through that pathway. And we also work closely with Aotearoa, who deal with adult sexual violence. So that, for example, if you're a victim of sexual violence and it happens to you in your job or in your personal life and you're a sex worker, or even if you're, anyone in society, there's processes in how you can follow through with getting support.
Okay, amazing.
And that's either through help, Aotearoa, and I'm just talking for the Auckland district, or going to the police.
And another shift that we've sort of seen is that of language, because obviously it used to be NZPC and now it's the New Zealand Sex Workers Collective. And for the benefit of our listeners who might be unfamiliar as to why that is, could you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess what's happened with the rights of the sex work movement is, when our organisation started, we were called the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective, and it was around reclaiming the word and destigmatising us as workers and our, just who we are as people. But as time moved on, sex work was actually coined by an American sex worker activist, Carol Lee, rest in peace. And so from that time when sex work was coined, it is, in the sex work movement, it is, the language has been changed to encompass anyone that is involved in the sex industry, from full service, escort, porn, dancing, sugar babies, essential massage. It's very vast.
Quite like an umbrella term to describe all those things.
All those things, and sex work is work.
Yeah. And I wanted to, because you said that, things have changed a lot. Is there something in particular that you've noticed in the industry that's shifted over time?
Yeah, online platforms. I guess, I think I was talking to one of my peers before coming here, was that in 2005 in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we started to see the move of sex workers, where advertising in papers have moved on to online platforms where sex workers can advertise online. And so that has really opened up the market to how workers can work. They can work, through platforms like Instagram, Twitter, sites where sex workers advertise, and, sex workers can work and travel, but there's still stigma and discrimination that can impact a sex worker, particularly if you're going to travel to a country where sex work is criminalised, and particularly with AI and profiling. For example, if you're travelling globally and you were just going in your personal time and you had been a sex worker and it's sort of come back that you're found on a website with your picture or your personal identification, that can impact you to travel. And so people have been deported back to their countries or been stopped at borders.
Wow.
And even here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, if you're a migrant sex worker, you can't work in the sex industry on a temporary visa or even on a student visa, work visa, tourist visa. So if we have, so if, for example, if a migrant worker, came on holiday and then they started doing sex work as a job, and then got found out by Immigration New Zealand, they would be in breach of their visa, they could receive a deportation liability notice and then deported. So we have dealt with some of those cases.
Wow.
Over the years, and one of our things is about repealing Section 19 of our law in the Immigration Act. But there's still, and also around the anti-discrimination laws around occupation, particularly for sex workers under the Human Rights Act. That's something that we would like to be amended to add in around anti-discrimination laws on occupations. Australia has been very successful around that,
Okay.
because I think currently there is a case in Australia, in Victoria, where a sex worker was discriminated based on her occupation in the sex work, from a few years back, but she is taking her employers to court because it's protected under the Human Rights Act over there, or what they call the EEO, Equal Employment Opportunities.
Okay. How soon or how likely do you think it is that New Zealand's going to follow in Australia's footsteps in that department?
From our lived experience, we have gone to the UN, United Nations, so New Zealand is signed up to international treaties with the UN, and most people don't know this as civil society. If we don't agree with our government laws or what the international treaties that they may not be looking after properly, we can go and to the UN, to Geneva, and every 4 years there's a review with international treaties that New Zealand has signed up with the UN, and as civil society we can put in a submission to that committee. So we went up to the CEDAW committee, which is the Convention to Eliminate Against Discrimination of Women, and we put a submission in to say that there's two things that we want to take up there, which is around repealing Section 19 of the PRA and the immigration law, and anti-discrimination laws and human rights based on occupation of sex workers. We would like that to be amended under the New Zealand Human Rights Act. And when we went up there in 2018, the CEDAW committee, these are the most intelligent minds in the world, they're people who specialise in human rights laws, I'm talking about from judges level or, blah, 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 but cut a long story short, we were very successful around the recommendations that the CEDAW committee made for the New Zealand government, which was to make amendments to the Section 19 of the PRA, but because we're under a new government now, things might not roll out as planned, so then we still continue to do academic research around building out evidence about the impact of the law has on migrant workers, or we do research on the impact of discrimination, particularly for sex workers who've been discriminated around employment, travel, and around informing policy around that, and then do more submissions.
Sounds like there's so much work that's happening just constantly to try and make these things happen. It's so important that these things are being changed. What is there anything that you find particularly challenging about working in this space?
No day's the same day. It's never boring.
That's good.
Yeah, and I guess if you're passionate about what things that you get involved in, I think it's important to really look after your health and wellness. Yesterday I sat with the team and I said, if it gets too stressful here, go shake yourself off for 10 minutes, go for a walk or get some sun, come back out, and then get back into it. But I guess I think we just keep on keeping on. And I know people get really disheartened about what sort of political climate we're under, not only in this country but globally. But we've got to keep on keeping on the good fight.
Just trying to make all the difference that we can. I wanted to go back to something that you mentioned about stigma. For listeners at home who might be going, how is there anything that we can do ourselves as the average human listening to help reduce the stigma
Yeah, I mean, it's really important that for sex workers that we have allies, and that's, allies who support decriminalisation, allies who support us in our work, and also, like, if people are just interested and want to know what we're about, just contact any of our branches, and we're most happy to come and to talk to any workforce or community space about sex work. Yeah.
Awesome. And so listeners can find, is it nzpc.org.nz?
Yeah.
Perfect. And I wanted to jump to a bit of a different topic now. I wondered if you could speak about if you've noticed a change in terms of, in the sex work industry and the workforce, the split of like genders and identities. Has that shifted at all in recent years?
Well, we've always had strong representation of trans sex workers, from the beginning of time. But I guess, I'd say probably in the last 20 years, definitely with gender identity is something that's changed in the industry, which is great because I believe, from my lived experience working in the industry, we've exposed to many sex workers where they're able to explore their sexuality, for money, playing different roles and genders, and it's good that it's recognised now. We're moving progressively around that, and I think it's really important. It's tough because, if Christians and the right-wing people who have these ideologies around marginalised communities start to create hate speech and actions towards marginalised people, that's really concerning. And I think it's important to have allies as well as those communities that are affected. It affects all of us because, we either have whānau or, colleagues or peers that are in that space. So we've just got to really support them and the haters out there.
Yeah, and I think especially with social media too, it's not hard to see because it's just being bombarded from so many different sides at the moment. It's hard to escape.
Unfortunately, social media is a very heteronormative ideology that comes out there, which, I think people need to get off there and actually go and be with the people of the living. But it's a tough climate.
It's a nice message to be present with people around you. I like that. Is there any message or anything that you wish that more people would understand about the sex work industry?
I guess, we're not going anywhere. We've been around from the beginning of time, just like homelessness. But I guess it's the more that it's, hopefully beyond my lifetime, that it's, normalised and it's just, just something that's, I'd hoped that my lifetime or beyond that anti-discrimination laws on occupation, that sex workers are covered under that, and also that migrant sex workers would be able to work, in this country, but anywhere, without authorities being on their case. But I guess, I just think it's really important that if anyone's asked, want to know who we are, what we're about, just contact a sex worker-led organisation. We're everywhere around the world. People just have to Google and get in contact with us.
And just be curious, I think. Is there any question that I haven't asked, if you'd like to share any thoughts on anything in particular before we wrap up?
No, I think we've covered everything, but thank you for inviting us to Sex and Space.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely to have you and chat more and learn about this work that you're doing. Very important, and I think, again, just to all of our listeners at home, nzpc.org.nz if you'd like to learn some more or connect with anyone as well. Definitely go through and check them out. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Before we sign off, we wanted to remind you about our 2 books that we have available, How to Talk with Your Kids About Porn and The Organ Education Forgot. These are both available as downloadable PDFs or in print, and you can head over to sexandspace.com to grab your copy. If you do, not only will you be educating yourself about a very important subject, but you'll also be supporting us and all the work that we do. So we think it's a win-win. If you'd like to support us in other ways, we'd love for you to buy some merch, which is also available on our website. We've got both mugs and t-shirts. As always, thank you so much for listening and being on this journey with us. Until next time, safe travels and see you on the next episode.